Well, tonight's message is satisfied with a question mark. Satisfied. Satisfaction. Wanting to be satisfied. I think it's something that a lot of us are constantly in search of. Humanity itself is always in search of. But I can even think of the practical things, like when you hear that word, like one of the things I think of is when I waited tables. So when I waited tables, it was like, you always wanted those people to be satisfied with the service you gave them, the food you gave them. I remember like one time these two ladies, they were a little snobby, okay? And so I was waiting on them, and they said, we'd love to have olives with blue cheese, so stuffed olives with blue cheese, all right? They make those, right? Okay. Because if not, I did, because I said, we don't have those. They're like, oh, but we really want it. Oh, man. Oh. And I'm like, you're not being cute right now with me. I'm a married man. I love my wife, even though these ladies are like in their 70s, right? Okay. But they're like, no. And I'm like, oh, my goodness, you know what? But I want you to have good service. So I go in the back, and with my little fat Italian fingers, this is a hard thing to do, I unstuff the olives that have that orange thing in it, whatever that is, and I stuff them with blue cheese. Don't worry, I'm washing my hands. I've got gloves on. Okay, so I do this for like 8 of those olives. I bring them back, sweating. I'm like, here you are. They're like, oh, great, thanks. They left me a horrible tip, all right? I know, right? This is just to vent it out. I'm still hurt by this. Boo. But I did all that just so that they would be satisfied, that like, they would have good service. They would walk away smiling and be happy. Maybe in relationships you've had that same battle, that same struggle. You want someone to be satisfied. But I think more than anything, all of us who are sitting here are in a battle in our own lives in search for satisfaction. It's a human thing. Actually, you might think of the song by Mick Jagger with the Rolling Stones. I can't get no. Okay. It's perhaps humanity's anthem, whether we want to admit it or not. I can't get no satisfaction, this constant searching for it. Because I try, and I try, and I try, and I try, and I can't get no satisfaction. Thank you. When I'm driving in my car and that man comes on the radio, he's telling me more and more about some useless information supposed to drive my imagination. When I'm watching my TV and a man comes on and tells me how white my shirts can be, but he can't be a man because he doesn't smoke the same cigarettes as me. When I'm riding around the world and I'm doing this and I'm signing that, and I'm trying to make some girl who tells me, baby, better come back later next week because you see I'm on a losing streak. I can't get no satisfaction. When you really think about the words of that song, those verses there, it's sad. I mean, it's funny, the last one is Mick Jagger's talking about trying to be with a woman and all that's taking place there, and him in his own life having that many times with girls. Still, the anthem he's saying, I can't get no satisfaction. Materialism, what people say we should be or what we should do, the guy on TV telling this is how we should look, image, all these things, but still I just can't seem to get satisfaction. I could have all the material, I could have the fame, I could have this, but I still can't seem to get satisfaction. And yet this song hits the charts and it's huge, and people are singing it in their car. Because it really, I think, is an anthem of humanity. We're in this constant search for satisfaction. And yet we just seem to say it over and over, I can't find it. I mean, when you look around, we're inundated with a surplus of advertisements that are telling us all the time what we need, opportunities, necessities, and they bank off of our desperation to be satisfied. That's actually how they literally make money. Our desperation to be satisfied. The definition of satisfaction is this: an act of satisfying fulfillment, gratification, contentment, being filled. The world around us has an insatiable thirst to be content, to find fulfillment, but it just seems unquenchable. It's almost like dumping water out on sand. Yeah, the sand gets a little wet, And you think you can see the water, and then it absorbs, and then it dries up. You keep doing that process, you'll go crazy. But it seems that that's what we're caught in. And the world around us is caught in this place. But I want to read Psalm 145, verse 16. It says, you open your hand, Lord, and satisfy the desires of every living thing. You open your hand and satisfy the desires of every living thing. There is one whose hands bring true satisfaction, that inside of his grip is satisfaction for you and me. Now listen, I want to say something, just a little segue. When I talk about being satisfied in who God is, it is not an excuse for laziness. I'm not talking about settling. But sometimes we might try to use that terminology when we're really not doing anything in our life, when we're kind of being lazy, and we use that excuse to say, I'm just satisfied where I'm at. I'm not talking about settling tonight. I'm talking about something much deeper that reaches into our souls. But want is something that we as human beings are constantly in a wrestle with. Want. Because it's out of these unappeasable desires that we can't seem to find this lasting satisfaction. And so from this, we constantly want. Give me, I need, I want. Right? We might not be walking around saying that because that would be weird. But we are in our minds sometimes. I want. Give me. I want to read a quote by George Bernard Shaw. He's an Irish playwright. He's a co-founder of the London School of Economics. And he said this, as long as I have want, I have a reason for living. Satisfaction is death. It's pretty sad. As long as I have want, I have a reason for living. That's what keeps me going. But yet that's the world around us. That's what we are seeing every day, this desire of want that keeps people going and going, but yet they keep hitting this wall. Emptiness, not satisfied, but the want. They're going, and then finally he says, in death is satisfaction. It's quite hopeless to me. But see, want creates this voracious appetite for satisfaction. Desperate. It sends us on these hopeless and sometimes painful journeys where we search, but yet things, that peace, that joy, that future we want just seems unobtainable. Some of these things we might desire and want, and I'm not saying want in a positive context here. We're like, man, I want to do this, and I have drive, and I have purpose. And I'm talking about this, like I said, a voracious appetite. Just give it to me. I need that. If I just had that, I could have some satisfaction. Success. If I just was successful. Pleasure. If I just had enough pleasure. Sex. Man, if I could just find that right relationship. Or that right moment. Money, a title, a job, position, a drug, an addiction. Whatever it is, that's this appetite in us that just wants, in search, looking desperately for satisfaction. It's like this hunger and thirst that is just ferocious. How many of you, when you're hungry, get angry? Like I heard someone call it hangry. Like, what is that? When you're hungry, I'm like, yes. Anna and I, my wife back there, we always laugh because we both know when each other is hungry. Because we'll fight about a paperclip. So I didn't leave that paperclip there. Did you leave that paperclip there? I didn't leave the paper. I'm like, and then after 10 minutes, we're like, what are we fighting? Are you hungry? Yes, so am I. Let's go get some food. We were quite moody. All right, but even that, just like a physical hunger we have, creates us to kind of change a little bit, even as a person. I remember when I had, when I was taking my driver's test for my license, right? I had failed my first one. The lady actually said, "Are you trying to kill me?" Just because I made a fast turn, I did everything right. I pulled over, I put the, flashers on. Is everything all right? It's very sad. That was what she said. I'm like, did I pass? Yeah, got out. They're kind of mean. But like I remember when we were signing up again, my instructor's like, "Hey, listen, you should go right after lunch." I'm like, "Why?" They're like, "Don't go before." I'm like, "Why?" They're like, "Because after they eat lunch, they're nicer." It's true though, right? All right, you mess with someone right before their lunch break, they're like, "Get out of my way, I just want to go eat a bologna." Why? Just a bologna. Or have you ever been so thirsty before? Like your mouth, you're like, "Oh my goodness!" Like maybe you've jumped into a pool, and you've literally, like, I've been thirsty before, and I've jumped into a cold pool, and you're almost tempted to drink the water. You're almost so tempted to drink that water of that cold pool. That's gross, isn't it? Don't act like you haven't been tempted until you see a 3-year-old walk out, and you're like, "Not going to drink the water." Jimmy's thirsty right now in the back. But just that thirst. I remember in Africa, I was so thirsty, we were pumping water, the pump would break. We were siphoning the water through a woman's stocking, okay? It was like we were so thirsty. It's brown, murky water. We stuck these little, light things that are supposed to kill stuff in it. That doesn't work in Africa. That works like in clear water. This was like mud water. I'm like, not doing it. Still tastes like dirt. But we were so thirsty, it didn't matter. I paid $20 in the bush for a Dasani that was this big. And I'm like, "I don't care. I'll give you $100. And I just savored it. That thirst. It'd do anything. But see, we come into the world. We walk throughout life. Our soul in this battle, in this desire, in this hunger and thirst for satisfaction. And so we enter the feast of this world all around us, whatever that might be. We shop around in their marketplaces. What can they offer? What can they give me? We sit at the table. We eat their food. We think, how can others satisfy us? And so we walk around the world looking for those things, whether it's that sex, whether it's that pleasure, whether it's that drug, that addiction, whether success, money, title, identity. Yet we go around and we look, please, desperately, I just need something to satisfy this hunger and thirst, but yet it's empty. It's almost like the movie Hook. Robin Williams and Peter Pan, when they're sitting at the table, right? And they're sitting there, and all the kids are eating, and there's nothing. You know what I'm talking about? You guys remember that movie? And you're sitting there, you're like, "There's nothing. That's not funny." And then all of a sudden, they're like, "Just believe, Peter," And then he closes his eyes and opens up, and it's this feast, and they're all eating, and it's like, oh my goodness, it was their imagination, and it became real. But it's almost like the polar opposite in that sense. We go into the world, and it seems like this giant, huge feast. People are there just eating. This is awesome, man. Take a bite out of this. Take a bite out of that. Have a little bit of this. Drink a little bit of that. And all these ways to find satisfaction, and you'll be filled up. It'll be great. It's everything you're looking for. It's everything you need. And then it just leaves you empty. It's really just nothingness. Oh, it might be good for a while. Listen, it might fill you up for a little bit. But then your stomach starts to growl again. Your mouth starts to get a little dry. And you're back in that cycle once again. See, the original meaning of the word satisfy throughout Scripture is often connected with the idea of being full, as if from a meal, drinking and eating. And it's amazing how in John chapter 6, Jesus talks about how he is the bread of life. If you eat of me, he's not talking like a cannibal, okay? He's saying if you eat of me, symbolically of my life, of what I've done for you, then guess what? You won't be hungry anymore. You'll be satisfied. And so it's only at the table with the Lord, it's only at that feast, it's only in that place with God that we can find this meal that truly satisfies us, nurtures every part of who we are. But see, we still get past this want, and then we get into this idea sometimes of effort. Yeah, oh, that's great, Pastor Stephen. There's a table and a meal. That's sweet. Is it a table like this is the table? Oh, that's great. Okay, but we get past that, and we look to our own effort. Mahatma Gandhi, I want to read what he said. Satisfaction does not come with achievement, but with effort. Full effort is full victory. So he's saying effort is more important than success. So maintaining your commitment to the end of a task is more important than completing it or not. And I understand what he's saying. Their effort is awesome, and that's to be applauded and to do your best. And that drive. And that's very important. But he's still undermining the idea of what true satisfaction is. It's a shallow definition of it. Because it's still looking to find fulfillment in oneself. In us. Our effort. Our own human effort. And so we try to do everything we can to find our satisfaction. Yeah, we have this want and this desire that we're grabbing it, and now that grabbing, that effort, we're doing everything we can to try to be a good person, honest, loving, giving, to do good things. And we look within ourselves to find contentment and fulfillment. And like I said, you can find a certain level of it, but you're still going to constantly find yourself on E, running empty, running off fumes, desperately crawling to these other tables the world offers with these false and empty promises that these meals they can give you can fill you up. We're about to read a quick story of a woman who searched for satisfaction. She went through both these avenues, want and effort, and yet was still coming up empty until she has this amazing divine intervention and moment with Jesus. The story is often titled The Woman at the Well. It's found in John chapter 4. So I'm going to turn there, and I want to read, and I'm going to start in verse 7. But just to give you a little background, Jesus had just left a place called Judea, and now he had to go to Samaria. And so he came across a town called Sychar. Now he was exhausted. He was tired from his journey, him and his followers who were with him. And so he sent his followers and his disciples off to go get food in the town. And Jesus sat by a well, thirsty. And this is where the story takes off. Verse 7. And a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" And the Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." And Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Let's pause for a second. I'm not going to go into great detail, but between the Jews and the Samaritans, there was deep animosity, anger, hatred. I'm not talking about New York and Jersey, okay? I'm talking about like hatred, deep hatred. The Jews looked at the Samaritans as unclean, right? Don't associate unless you have to. Some of them wouldn't even go around or through the towns in Samaria. They would take a whole other route that would be days and days more of travel just so they wouldn't have to encounter the Samaritans. And so there's this deep animosity. And not only that, but now you have a Jew who's Jesus and a Samaritan woman, but you have a man and a woman. And in that culture, in that time, guess what? A man wouldn't just approach and talk to a woman. Or a woman to a man. It would be rude. So all you men tonight are so rude. Saw you. Hey. Did you get a root beer float too? Yes, it was either Sunday or root beer float. Oh, good. Cool. I saw the cup. We say stupid things sometimes, guys, when we're trying to make conversation. So ladies, deal with us. Look at it as flattering. Like, oh, he's stuttering, he's getting all mumble jumble. That's cute. We're not perfect. All right? Okay, sorry. Sorry, I'm just going off. So this whole conversation, this whole situation that's happening between Jesus and this woman at the well, it just seems all wrong in one sense. It just doesn't fit right. And then Jesus says, for the first time ever, he makes the reference, and he talks about living water. Living water. Verse 11. Sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock? Jesus answered, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. So the woman said to him, sir, wait, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. He told her, go call your husband and come back. I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said to her, you are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true. So Jesus hits her right where she's at. Now, when you look, and even in the language that's happening here in this conversation, there's a little bit of an attitude in one sense from this woman towards Jesus. One, he's a Jew, he's a man, all these things that are taking place. And so there's a little bit of this attitude that's happening. Not so much respect towards him. But she hears this living water, and she thinks he's talking about actually like running water, like a spring somewhere. So she's like, great, I'd love to have that because I don't want to have to dig, and I don't want to have to come here, and I don't want to have to draw water every day when I'm going back and forth to do that. Tell me where this is so that I could drink this water. And Jesus, he's sitting there on this well, and he appears, if an outsider was looking, as the hopeless and helpless one sitting on the edge of a well just wanting to drink a little bit. But really, she's the one who's helpless. She's craving for satisfaction that she cannot reach. And Jesus knows that, and that's why he hits her right in the heart when he says, go tell your husband. Because he knows what's taking place, as we see in that next verse there. When she says, I don't have a husband, he says, you're exactly right. You've had 5, and now the man you're living with is not your husband. You know what Jesus is doing? He's bringing her on this journey to the wellspring of life and that living water, but he's having a walk with her to remove some stones in her life, to break the ground that's in her life, that's stopping and hindering, the things that are getting in the way of her being able to experience this living water. And part of that is connecting with her past and her present. Have you ever had to break hard ground before? Bailey's team, you know where you're at. Okay, let me tell you something. When we were in Bailey's this past summer, they're like, we're going to put some posts down for a house. It'll be an easy one-day job because there's so many of you guys here. We're like, no problem. We can dig like 3-foot holes, 2-foot holes. And they asked the owners of that land, is there rock under here? And they said, no, we don't think there is. Let me tell you something. There was. 3 days we were digging. I'm looking at Jonathan right now because there was 3 of us after 8 hours of digging that people went back. We stayed there with these metal rods, blisters. I cannot tell you how exhausting it is. You're like a caveman. You're just throwing metal. All that you have. And it's like, dink, a little chip. You're like, oh gosh, we're going, we're pushing. We're taking water breaks. We're doing 20 hits and then a break. Water. 3 people go. Boom, you're back again. I mean, it was exhausting. See, this lady, she had rocks, layers and layers of rocks upon her life, stopping her from reaching the living water. And Jesus is beginning to walk her through this place of revelation to bring her to that spring of life. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you are a prophet. See, all of a sudden, she calls him sir. See, he tells her something about her life that she's like, wow, how would you know that? You must be someone special. So the attitude and the little bit of a attitude now turned into sir. One of respect and reverence. She realizes, okay, this is someone. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you're a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. Woman, Jesus replied, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. He's talking about himself. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Talking about himself. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is Spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the Spirit and in truth. Now the woman said, I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. And then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, am he. See, all of a sudden, when Jesus reveals something in her past, a thirst starts to take place in her life. She's hungry for something. And this conversation about worship and truth and who God is begins to unravel because Jesus is there, and his words that he's speaking and his presence and the terminology of living waters is beginning to pound away at those things in her life, and she's beginning to open her eyes and see who is before her. The source itself of living waters. And in that, he describes grace and truth. Grace and truth that comes out of this living water because Jesus is the grace and Jesus is the truth. He is that living water. When you look at water, it's a source of life. It's cleansing. It helps with survival and refreshment. When you look at grace and truth, it's mercy, it's forgiveness, healing, freedom, hope, satisfaction. I love how Jesus uses this analogy to show us the very thing that can meet our satisfaction, that can quench our thirst, that our soul cries out for in desperation, in desires and actions of want and effort, is only him and him alone. See, sometimes the wells of this world, they're easier and they're more convenient to get through. And they're easier to get to. And they're easier to drink from. Because it's just right there and it's right in front of us. But it's almost like drinking salt water for hydration. The more and more you drink it, the more and more thirsty you get till finally you die. It's right around you. So this is what I feel tonight. I feel that some of you are in a search for real and true satisfaction. You truly are searching. You have been in that search. You've taken hard roads. You've done everything you can to find that satisfaction, and you haven't found it. And you really are desperately looking for it. And so tonight, I know it sounds simple. It's very simple. The way to begin this journey of discovering and being filled by that is to look at the one who is our source of living water. It's Jesus Christ. He is the source. Maybe tonight, even this conversation has just awakened a thirst in you like that woman at the well where suddenly something in her heart was throbbing. See, the rest of the story is she goes back into the town and tells people, you must come. The Messiah is here, the one we have waited for. And she brings her town back to hear about Jesus. And it says that many heard and followed him. They asked him to stay 2 more days as he spoke to them truth. But tonight, something in you, that thirst, was awakened. But I also think that some of you are at this different place. You've come to church, you've been religious for a long time, yet you still find yourself unsatisfied. No, yeah. You still find yourself unsatisfied. You might know all the right things, but you've sat at this banquet table starving, and yet you haven't really eaten of it. See, it's not enough just to come and to sit down at a table and look at all the food. You have to partake of it. See, that woman could have left the well right after he said that, great, wow, that's kind of weird. Are you a psychic? Are you a prophet? And walked away. Crazy story, and told the story for the rest of her life. Like, this guy told me everything. Still with no satisfaction. And with the man she was living with, maybe divorce or he dies again, and she continues to look for another and another and another, just like the 5 before, unsatisfied. So maybe you've jumped into the experiences of God, hoping that it would quench your thirst, like you jump into a pool, but you haven't drank. You haven't really drank of the living waters. You haven't really embraced who Jesus is and taken him on the inside of your life. And lastly, I think there's others of you who have experienced the reality of Christ and the satisfaction. You've drank of his living water. You've really felt it. But you've let stones and dirt of addiction, pleasure, hate, lust, greed, bitterness, cynicism, regret, condemnation, legalism, busyness. You let these things fill the well of your life. Like stones. Like dumping dirt into a well of water. The more dirt you dump in there, the more rocks you throw in there, it's going to dry up. And that's taking place in your life. What once was fresh and pure water, you found pleasure, contentment, fulfillment in. It's now been barricaded and polluted by the dirt of this world that you've let just inundate in your life. Listen, I'm not yelling at you. I'm speaking to you from my heart. But we serve a God. He wants to wash over us. He wants to embrace us. He wants to get inside of us. That living water is water that redeems us, restores us, it heals us. It brings life and satisfaction back in. But you've just let the enemy lie to you. He's lied to you, and in those lies is like every stone, another stone thrown into that wellspring, another stone thrown into that wellspring. You say, well, I haven't been happy. I haven't been fulfilled with God and everything like that. And I go to church and I do all these things, but you're missing out on everything that's taking place. Because Jesus wants to fill your life. He is the source. Would you stand up with me tonight? And this is what I want to kind of speak over us. It's from Isaiah 58. See, in this, the prophet Isaiah, he's addressing the people of God. He's focusing on their expectations to be filled, to be content and blessed by God. But he's pointing out to them, as God is pointing out to them through this prophet, they've just been observing the ways of God. He speaks to them the emptiness of their religious services and their vain outward expressions and forms of worship. The people are actually wondering, where's our satisfaction in God? We're observing all the right things. We even seem to be acting in all the right things. But they were empty and dry wells. They weren't seeing any life around them. They weren't seeing anything from God or the blessings of God around them or in their life. And they're complaining and they're angry and they're saying, why? Why? That's where God's saying, you are people who are just observing, but you're not partaking. You're not eating. Nothing's getting on the inside. You wonder why you're empty? You wonder why you're dry? Wonder why you're in a search for satisfaction? Have you taken it on the inside? And this is what God says. He's saying, disassociate yourself with the world and its wickedness. Bow your head in humility. Cry out for my true presence. Cry out for my grace. Open your heart with a desire for real satisfaction and fulfillment. Open your mouth to partake of this meal of who I am, to really embrace it. And he says, this is then what I will do. You will call and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help and he will say, here am I. If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings. This is the promise God gives us. That literally you and I can become these well springs of life. See, I told you at the beginning what that word satisfied means in its biblical context. It means to be filled, like with food. It actually, when you push the word and study the vocabulary of it, it means so filled that you're like, oh my goodness, I'm about to overflow. Like when you just stuffed your face with pizza after a hard day. You're like, I'm about to overflow, and I love that pizza. It's about to overflow. It's satisfaction that you're so filled up, overflowing. And yet Jesus says to us that we're called to be these wells that are overflowing. See, when we find our satisfaction in God, when we begin this journey of satisfaction, we cry out for the Lord, real experiences of his indwelling. Holy Spirit, you came to be in me, to be with me. When you cry out, Holy Spirit, fill me up, you're going to be filled up by God. You're going to be filled up with true satisfaction, and you're going to begin to overflow into the lives of those that are around you. You're going to begin to be that well that people come and they come to drink from. That's what we're called to be as the church. Just like that woman who came to that well on a normal day, in a normal routine, and it was all the wrong situations taking place, but it was exactly right because Jesus was embracing her life in that moment. Jesus was walking with her step by step, brick by brick, stone by stone, pebble by pebble, to bring her to that wellspring of life. And in that, she not only drank of it, but she ran to the town, she told others of it, and she brought them back, and many came to know Jesus through that. That's the type of well I want to be. And I have felt weak, and I have felt drained, guys, and I have felt dried, and this week was a hard week, and I didn't want to come up here and even preach. I'm like, Lord, I feel empty, I feel this, but all of a sudden I was eating my own message. I said, Holy Spirit, I don't want to just hear from you. I don't just want to have the right word to say. I want to be filled. I want to be filled. I want to be filled with you. And that's what he wants for you and me. So Jesus, even as we worship you tonight, Lord, fill us up. Whether this is just the beginning journey for some of us, a thirst has been awakened and we realize, I need this Jesus. Whether we've come to many things but we've never fully embraced, or whether we've let stones in our life dry up our well, Jesus, fill us up. Jesus, may we call out to you. May you be our living water. May this world see a church and a people whose satisfaction is found in you. Not in even our own wants and efforts, Lord God, but in our desire and our fulfillment found in you.